So in my days at General Mills, I was working in the Progresso business. It's a soup business, canned soup. So ready to serve canned soup. And the team had come up with this incredibly delicious frozen soup. Okay. And so the food scientists came up, I mean, it was incredible. It tested so well. It was like frozen broth chips and vegetables that you put it in the pot and it melted down and it simmered into this like delicious homemade soup. And consumer taste tests were like, yep, this is great, amazing. And so the team said, all right, let's put it together. Like, let's go put it out there and test it because like this is amazing. And so the business was like, yes, shouldn't we launch this frozen soup product, right? And so you could at risk of being like, yep, you should do exactly what you think because hey, it's incremental to the business that you have. It's a totally new shelf space, right? And so you can really drive your business in a new place and expand your brand is the second big thing too. So shouldn't we just do this? We know it tastes great. Well, my team worked with our R&D team. We packaged it up into these two kind of like little big containers and put it in Sam's Club, which is the club store here. And so it's a heck of a really big size container, put it on the shelf. And we're just waiting for it to go flying off the shelf, right? As people come back with their carts. And what happened was they would open the door, look at it, and close the door. What? And then people would come by, ooh, open the door. They'd even pick it up and then they put it back, close the door. I'm like, what are they doing? We got to tell them this thing is delicious. Like, it is amazing. It's like, it is so good. People said they love it. Why are they putting it back? Right. And so we started asking, like, what's going on? And it turns out when we were asking a different question, we're like, why don't you like this? What the answer was, hey, you made chicken noodle. And well, I love chicken noodle, but chicken noodle in a can is like good enough. Or I can make it at home well enough. Like if I'm going to go to the buying something this big that takes up this much freezer space, it's got to be something that I can't make at home or get out of a can. And so what we found was like, hey, even though the product was good, it was the wrong size because it was too big. It was in the wrong channel. It shouldn't be in club. And it was the wrong flavor. And so in this case, the action for the business was to not launch the product. And it was right for the business because it saved a heck of a lot of money in the end. So inaction was actually okay.
My name is Jochem van der Veer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called TheyDo, the journey management platform for business decision making. We raised over $50 million and are growing globally. Our enterprise customers include Ford, J&J, the Home Depot, and Pfizer. I mean, wherever you look, understanding customers is key to staying ahead. But in order to do this at scale, aligning so many different teams with the customer journey is incredibly hard. But it is possible. I really wish this podcast existed before we started our company because so many companies are organizing around journeys and there's so much to learn. So in order to share what I'm learning, what I'm hearing with our community, I meet with industry experts. And in my video podcast, I'm here to explore the world of business strategy, design, and journeys, customer journeys, to really get an understanding of how leaders are changing their way in their business. So let's dive into the show. So I'm joined today by Elizabeth Oates. She's the author of More Than Just Interesting, How to Build an Insight Function for Impact. And she's a recognized leader in the insight industry with over 20 years of experience. She's helped major organizations turn insight into strategic assets, driving customer-focused decision-making. And as a passionate mentor, she has defined 9 core skills, which we're going to talk about today, for insight professionals. And we're going to be covering what it means for the future of insight teams, but also, since AI is the hot topic today, I'm sure she has a few perspectives on the topic. But before we go into it, Elizabeth, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, this is going to be so much fun. And we're going to go through some of the concepts in your book, but I want to just start in the middle, if I may. And I want you to help us understand collection debt. It's a concept that you are talking a lot about. And I think many organizations and a lot of our listeners are struggling with this. And without spilling the beans, what is collection debt and why is it an important part of building a sound insight team?
I'm glad you brought this one up. Collection debt is something that I think a lot of organizations struggle with, whether they realize it or not. Collection debt means that companies fall into this habit of continuously gathering more and more consumer data, whether it's through surveys or shopping behavior, panels, social listening, lots of different ways, but they never actually do anything with that data, or they do less than they collect, right? So it's really kind of a sense of collecting for the sake of collecting. Often thinking, if we just gather more insights, the answer is going to magically appear. But instead of moving forward, they create this backlog of information that really doesn't serve the business. And that debt, if you will, accumulates over time. And I think this is important because there's a twofold danger in collection debt. One is that it wastes resources. So there is time, money, and energy all involved for data that just ends up sitting on the shelf or in a drive somewhere in the cloud, but not really being used. And the second thing is that if there's an insights team that's doing the collection of this data, it can erode the credibility of that insights function. Because if nothing is happening with work, partners will stop asking for it. Or worse, they'll stop trusting the insights team to really drive impact. So, I think those are two really, important dangers for us to be aware of. And not to start the conversation with danger, but absolutely we have to be aware of them. So, I'm thinking as we're talking about collection debt, really the next thing to consider after knowing what it is, how do you avoid getting stuck in that cycle? And, first and foremost, I think that we have to flip the script when you think about engaging with insights. Most organizations think about insights when they have a question. But actually, I would argue that you need to think about the action that you want to take first. So if you can't articulate what decision you'll make or what choice that you're trying to inform, you're really not ready to be collecting anything just yet. So you can break this cycle, by, a couple of ways. There's three things that I think that we should do. One is align on the action before you start collecting any information. So before you do any research, before you go out and engage your customers, you need to get crystal clear on what you're going to do with the results. I think about if you don't know what you're going to do with the answer, you're not ready to ask the question. So this really forces the teams to think ahead as to how they'll use insights. And that can be across the entire business, launching a product, changing a strategy, stopping an initiative, whatever it is. What's the action? Put that action first. The second thing that I think we have to do is really clarify the business question. We often hear companies asking for data because they're unsure what decision to make. And in those cases, it's our jobs, as insights leaders to push back and help them clarify what the real question is that will lead to action. What is the knowledge gap that we have that's inhibiting us from taking action? So that's number two. And then, of course, number three, because great things come in threes now, is that our job as insights leaders is to tie every insight to a specific decision point. So one of my favorite ways to do this, and that's easy, is to go through scenario planning. All right. So we work with our partners and we say, hey, if we learn X, what will we do? If we learn Y, what will we do? And really that kind of inputs this process of taking action based on the insight that we find. So, ultimately, avoiding collection debt is about making sure that insights are used as a lever for business action. It's not a check the box exercise or a prove me that I'm right exercise. It's really about, taking that action and using insights to be that springboard to it. So, you know, I think of it this way: insight should be the spark that ignites action and never just a library of facts.
I love that. I wasn't even expecting such a detailed answer or like story around what collection that would be. So let's unpack a few things. I remember when I was, I don't know, a decade ago or so, I was a research practitioner myself and doing a lot of the qualitative research. And then
Yeah.
we always jokingly said to the business, right? If big data, that was the theme back then, if big data
Yeah.
were the answer, we'd all be multi-billion-dollar revenue companies, right?
Yeah.
Because we have it. And now what you are actually saying is, sure, but on the qualitative or the unstructured data side of things, it's kind of the same still. We collect more, we have more of it. We are basically like having more capabilities than ever to
Yes.
get all our insights in, but they're
Yes.
not actionable unless we are
Right.
intentional about it. And that's actually creating a lot of collection debt. And therefore teams struggle. They're not taking seriously. But to your point, there's a few ways that you can do something about that. Is that an accurate summary of what you actually are laying out?
Well said. And I think you're exactly right. Having the right intention is the starting point.
Right. But what do we do about this notion of collecting and collecting and collecting? I mean, it's never easier than sending surveys today. It's never easier to record calls. It's never easier to have access to what people are saying, right? How they are
Yes.
feeling about interactions.
Yeah.
So it's on one end easier than ever to collect. But if we have all that data, shouldn't we say, hey, that's fantastic. We have like a big vault of treasures and we can start to use it? Or we just say, no, that's irrelevant. You have to be intentional about what is the decision that you want to make and then start to collect the right data? Or can we also look at the big pile of insights that we already have to actually find something useful? How do you approach that?
I think the answer is yes. Yes, and I say yes and a lot. So yes, what we've collected in the past, it matters, right? And we should leverage it. We should use it. Yes, and we also have to think about going forward. What else do we need? Do we need anything else? And what's ahead that would make us think differently about what we have in that vault? So I think about it like this. If we're driving a car and I'm the insights person, my job is to help us understand what's around us. And I have two tools to do that. One is the rearview mirror. And that's a really important tool because it helps us look back into that vault of data that we have and understand how we got here, where we've been, what we've overcome. Yes, and the other tool that I have is the windshield. And the windshield is that tool that like helps us look forward to see what's ahead. What do we have to navigate? What solutions do we need to offer? What questions do we have to ask to go forward into the future? And so, we have to have both tools. But if you're driving that car, the windshield is pretty big because the rearview mirror is about this big and the windshield is like this big. So yes, both are important, but really staying focused on the future, leverage that past data, but stay focused on the future.
Ooh, that's a really good definition. I never heard this one. I'm gonna steal that from you. I love that
Please
because it's
do.
also
Please
like
do.
very true, right? The
Yeah.
windshield is very much bigger, and therefore there are so many more opportunities than if we look back. But talking about looking back, how do
Yes.
you? I'm sure you've come across many of the voice of the customer teams in your work that are
Yeah.
typically looking backward, right? They're surveying people. In some organizations, they're just keeping the score, like is our NPS up or down because the survey says so, and that's it. But how do you work with these teams to actually also help them to start looking forward? Because only looking backward is nice, and in some organizations, unfortunately, the entire VOC function is about looking back. So how should we think about looking forward if we're stuck in those kind of ways of working?
Yeah, I think this aligns really well, unfortunately, with the collection debt discussion too, because it is important to understand and to measure the experiences that our customers are having. Whether it's in store or online, on an app, on a website, we have to understand what's going on. But understanding what's going on is only step one. Measuring has to be done purposefully. If we just measuring doesn't change the experience. Neither does reporting on it, right? So we could have all the data and we could create all these beautiful reports. And I've been on functions and teams that create some pretty awesome reports. But that also doesn't change the experience. We have to change our mindset to say, this data is not just something that we're collecting, but it's a springboard to action. It's understanding like, okay, so now that we have this, not just what, and not just so what, but now what? What are we going to go do about it because of it? And forcing that conversation makes us look at that data differently and use it in a new way. Collecting that information is important, but it's not important unless we do something with it.
Right. How do you think about the insight life cycle? Like some insights, like I was talking to an airline, like one of the big airlines here in Europe, and
yeah,
they said like, look, when people have issues with baggage, there's like typically 4 topics where all the key insights revolve around. And it has been so for almost a decade.
Yeah.
So how do we think about the insight lifecycle? Because sometimes you have something really specific that is only valid for, let's say, a month or 2 months, or right now, and we have to act on it right now. It's very important, versus things that are true all the time, but just in varying degrees. So what do you think about insight lifecycle? Is that a concept that you use? Is that a thing in your mind?
I think that's a really interesting way to talk about, how long is an insight true? And my first reaction was like, wait a minute, they've had the same data that the same problems are causing customers, the same 4 things for how many years? And they're probably still problems because no one's actually doing anything about it, right? So if we keep uncovering that our customers are having the exact same problems 4 years in a row, I think we should probably look internally first and go.
Right. Yeah. So I think like to nuance that a little bit, it's obviously different things that are occurring in the current situation, right? We didn't even have a mobile app like 2 decades ago, but you lose your baggage when you travel. And then there's all these problems and there's all these feedback that we collect and all these interactions that we have with our customers that have valuable insights in them, right? So again, like just to course correct that a little bit, of course, it's different, but there is definitely a life cycle to some of these.
There is. And one thing that I've found really helpful to understand, where are we in the life cycle of our insights, is to take this lens. There's a 3-part lens. One is what's no longer true, what's still true, and what's now true. And that can help us, understand, are there things that are carrying through, like still true, always have been, always will be. When you lose your baggage on a flight, it's a problem. That's always been true, and it always will be true if I lose my baggage when I come on the next trip. But if you also say what's no longer true and what's now true, can help us understand if we need to think about, are there new insights that we need to go out and collect, understand, discover, uncover. Yes, so I would use that lens.
So how do we frame this? Because you obviously say businesses need to be intentional about the decisions they want to make.
Yeah.
So that defines already like pretty good the scope of where the insights should be collected from, or where in exactly the part of the business we should be looking for. But it's sometimes not even obvious that where in the customer experience should we actually start to collect new data, research people, talk to them, survey them, whatever we want to do to collect meaningful data. So what's the secret there? Like, how should we go from like jump from business problem, like here's where the business needs it, to, okay, and therefore this is the right place to start collecting new data? Like, how do we think about it? Do you have a framework or a way of thinking about that could be useful for folks to learn about?
Absolutely. So this is a great question because, where do we start collecting? I think where we start collecting is where we believe we have an opportunity to take action. And the reason I say that is because if I go out and I collect data from my business and I bring it back, but the business has no way to act on it, it's really just sitting on the shelf. So I would focus on where are the parts of that journey that we can actually make a change. What are we willing to do? What are we willing to consider? And then we dig there first.
And is this a conversation with that's ongoing with your business stakeholders? Because you mentioned journey,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes the journey is not even known, and sometimes there's a very comprehensive view of the entire customer journey, and we can dig into all the different
Yes.
levels and nuances. So then it's easier, and then we also know where the gaps are in our knowledge, if at all. But
Yeah.
is this an ongoing conversation that you're having with your
Yeah.
stakeholders? Is it more like, okay, thank you for the problem, their business, now let me and our team go and find you some answers?
Yeah, no, great question. And I think that ongoing conversation, yes, absolutely true. And this idea of developing partnerships is actually, we talked about the 9 core skills that I have, is one of the core skills that insights professionals need to have. And if you don't have, you need to develop, because it's really about, I have to understand what my partners are thinking, how they make choices, what questions they're facing, what challenges they're facing, so that I can build this underlying degree of trust, right? And the reason that that trust is important is that oftentimes consumer insights and CX professionals have to come back and deliver bad news, right? Customers are having a problem. They don't like this. This idea kind of didn't really work. And so if you have built that trust and have that ongoing conversation, that news lands much more easily and is much more leaned into by your partners because you built that. The other thing that we want to think about is proactive planning. So, if you think, well, why wouldn't we use this insight? Well, we don't have a chance because that time to do that has already passed, right? This ongoing conversation, we understand, okay, hey, business planning cycle starts on April 1st or July 1st or whatever it is for your business. You know that you need to be done collecting your insights, done summarizing, and ready to share with the business by those days. So this like ongoing conversation enables that. One of the things that I always was struck by when I got into retail was, hey, why there was always this like last minute rush at the end of the year. And they're like, December 25th is coming. And I'm like, wait, why are we surprised? Didn't December 25th happen on December 25th last year? Like, how did this sneak up on us? So this ongoing conversation allows insights leaders to really insert the insights at the exact moment for an organization to take action.
In some organizations, it's sometimes even tied to the annual planning, right?
Yes.
When the real budget discussion happens,
Yeah.
you need big insights for that. But
You
then there's
absolutely do.
the quarterly planning, then there's the PI planning, then there's the sprint planning, then there's the whatever planning there is. There's all these different planning rituals and decision-making
Yeah.
rituals, effectively. But they don't necessarily always need the big insight, the next thing, the new thing, right? Sometimes it's like tiny little insight that can
Yeah.
nuance the decision from this to that. How should we think about the levels of insights? Is there like a definition that you like to use? Is it everything is an insight, but it depends on the business? Or is there like a clear sizing that we should be considering? Like how do we think about that?
I think if I can challenge the idea, even more than sizing, you're right, the point in time on which an insight can be delivered makes it even more actionable. So I couldn't agree more on the idea that the business planning cycle is meaningful, right? And why is it meaningful? Because that's when decisions are being made. That's when we're saying we're going to allocate resources and prioritize our resources for the next year in these different ways. And if I, as an insights leader, can come and say, hey, here are the 3 big opportunities or 3 big problems or 3 low-hanging fruit problems that we can go and address, that's a clear springboard into action and making sure that the insights that we bring, whether they're like big ideas or easy ideas, can really be acted upon.
So what's the anatomy of a perfect insight in your vocabulary?
Good. Well, I mean, it has to all. I kind of had everything in here now. I'm just kidding. The insights will not be perfect, but we have to understand what's meaningful for a consumer and why, right? The why piece of the insight is really what makes it an insight, because if we know why, we can know what to do. If you say, 25% of our customers are struggling with the checkout experience. Oh, well, that's interesting. but we're trying to make this impactful.
Right.
And if you
This
can
is
say
not an
that,
insight, right? This is
it's
more
not an
like
insight.
fact. This is
It's
data. This is data
yes,
telling us fact. This is a problem. Okay.
exactly,
But why?
exactly. There's a problem, right? And so, but if we understand why that's happening, then we can actually go do something about it. There you get to the insight idea. So, and I think we were talking about, collecting experience data across all sorts of experiences and getting lost in the reporting of it. We don't want to get lost in the reporting of it because then we're just reporting facts, right? It becomes a relay of facts. And so that's something we want to move out of that into impactful.
Where I see this the biggest is that coming back to the VOC teams, I want to be picking on them, but this is what happens, right? They have their tax analytics tools, they have their this tool, that tool, and
Yeah.
they have their surveys. So what is bubbling up from the surveys is what they think is the most important thing to do.
Yeah.
Put it in a report, big headline, big slides, and everything is centered around that. But what you're saying is, well, maybe it's totally irrelevant because we're looking at the problem from a whole different angle, what the business needs and what we have signaled. So it's a
Yeah.
big disconnect that many teams are facing. When you say insight teams, in some organizations, they are part of the customer experience function. Sometimes
Yeah.
they're part of research. Sometimes there's dedicated insights teams. It's not always a role. When you say insights teams, what is the spread that we're talking about?
Everything you just said is totally
Okay,
true,
good.
right? There are sometimes dedicated, centralized insights teams who your job is to come to work every day and discover something that's important for a customer and share it out with the business in a way that the business can take action on. There's other
Right.
insights teams that are really embedded into the business and are thinking about specific parts of the journey of the brand, and that works too. But either case, or if you're sitting in a CX team, same thing too, right? It's about what are we going to do because we've learned this thing. And if we can all go forward, no matter where you sit or how you're organized, that can help push it forward.
Right. So what do you think is the best way? Is there a better way of doing it? Having a centralized team, having embedded people in the organization? Is there a difference between different industries? Like, how have you seen the best insights teams be different versus the crappiest ones, if I may ask?
Sure, sure. If you're thinking about, structuring, insights teams, oh, one of the biggest mistakes, no matter if you're centralized, if you're matrixed, if you're embedded in the business, the biggest mistake is really about not aligning to this being the center of decision making. So you can make any of those structures work as long as that what is true is that insights are at the center of decision making. So we don't want insights teams to be set up as like the back office functions, call me at the deli counter. When I call your number, I'll get back to you. Like that's not going to work. If we can't be disconnected from the people making key choices. So, when that happens, insights teams often struggle with impact because they get brought in too late or they get asked to kind of validate decisions that instead of shaping the decisions. So that can be an issue as well. So, but really being at the center, and you also hear about teams of like, hey, this is our quant team and this is our qual team, and that can take away from being aligned to the actual business and the decisions that they're trying to support, like innovation, brand growth, customer experience. If your insights teams aren't organized to the business like those teams, there's a chance they're going to be irrelevant.
Right. But do we have a language problem there as well? Because in essence, they are collecting data, they're analyzing data just as much as
Yeah.
a data science team would do it.
Yeah.
Although they are typically focused more on the structured data that is available. But in the end, it's all the same. It's all data, right? And the data teams are taking very seriously. We've been building those functions out. We have a lot of them. And yet the insights teams are typically smaller because they are still
Yeah.
seen as the qualitative aspect of things. Did we do that on purpose by creating a language barrier, or is that something that just is the nature of the qualitative insight, the real why behind the what, that
Yeah.
just makes it that it is the way? How do you think about that?
I think we have to challenge our. You're right that there is a language opportunity, if you will, in understanding how we talk about who we are as an insights team and how we operate, right? When we use phrases like qualitative, it sounds fluffy,
Right.
but the insights that we're bringing forward are not fluffy. They're meaningful. They're opportunities to drive impact for our businesses, right? So actually in my book, one of the things that I talk about is how do we describe what we do and how do we ask our partners to describe what we do? The data from something like a credit card data is quantitative, yes, but so is, validated survey data to understand how consumers are thinking, right? They're both quantitative. So should we refer to one as business metrics and one as consumer metrics rather than quantitative and qualitative? Because if you say qual, sometimes it can feel to someone who's not understanding of, insights, that qual feels fluffy and quant means necessary. But in reality, both qual and quant are important. But if we think about it as business and consumer metrics, that can help us go forward, kind of hold hands and all agree that we have to look at both sides of the equation.
Yeah. I'm seeing some insights teams move away from qual and call it unstructured.
Yeah.
So we're doing analysis on unstructured data, and all of a sudden, okay, now
Right.
we have a seat at the table, and just the language changes, but you're still doing the same thing that you did before. It's now called differently. So maybe that's a good segue to where AI is playing a big role in this, because it is making possible that insights teams actually don't only process thousands of insights if they're lucky and if they're really good, but they can do hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of data points, and they can analyze this at scale using AI capabilities. So that has shifted tremendously, especially the larger the organization, the more important these functions are. So how do you see the way analysts works today has shifted over, let's say, the last 2 years?
Yeah, I think that today we have hit an inflection point, you're right, in how we go forward as insights professionals and understanding the consumer side of the equation. But for me, I would say that without hesitation, human judgment and context are more critical than ever. So yes, AI can absolutely accelerate the collection and the summarization of data. But what it can't do for us, at least not yet or not well, I believe, is really understand that unique context of your business, your customers, or the decisions that you're facing. I haven't seen AI yet, I'll say yet, at the time of this recording, know which insights are truly meaningful versus which are just noise. And so that's where, as humans, we have to come in and we have to interpret data and we have to connect it to business strategy and we have to guide action. So AI can help us generate even more data, but we need the skilled humans to sort of make sense of it all and prioritize what matters. So I think, like I said, that our role is evolving. It's more important. It's evolving from being collectors of data to really using that as AI as a tool to help us with that, so that we might become strategic advisors and storytellers. It's really about helping our organizations navigate through all of this AI generated information to make smart, customer-centered decisions. So yeah, I think that the secret for us in AI is to leverage AI absolutely as a tool so that our insights can really, truly be useful.
If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave a review. It makes all the difference. The Experience Edge podcast is where I interview business leaders, CX pioneers, and the best designers who share their insight on creating business impact, having an edge on the customer experience. Do you want more exclusive content and behind-the-scenes access? Check out the Experience Edge podcast on YouTube and LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing. Now let's get back to the conversation. So for some, it's scary in a way that it's challenging the entire function. To others, it's exactly what you say, right? There is some human judgment and the context of the business, the unwritten laws of how we operate and how we think about our customers that are not necessarily embedded in any code or written or visualized language that are available. That's one thing. But you can also say, look, over 2-3 years, if we play out the speed of innovation that's currently going on, those problems will go away. So what remains for the insight function? Like, let's think about it from the 9 skills perspective.
Yeah.
Like, what are some of the key capabilities that people are in insights should be putting more emphasis on to stay relevant, where AI is taking a lot of the grunt work out of the work?
Yeah.
How do you think about applying your own nine grit skill matrix, if you will, or how you want to call it, to the change that we're facing for the whole insight industry, if I could say it that way?
Absolutely. Let me start with, I couldn't be more excited about AI. So I know that there is like some folks are feeling threatened, but I am really excited about it because I think it can help me do my job better. I think it can help me spend more time doing the things that I love and that I'm really good at, and less time doing the things that I don't actually love so much, right? I laugh and joking a little bit, but also in truth, as when I started as an analyst, I used to print off, thousands of open-ended responses, unstructured data, if we'll use that term now. And I would set aside a weekend day and bring a whole pack of highlighters. And I would sit and read through each one, highlighting the themes that go to each coded response, right? So each response, so that I could then kind of go back and code how many responses to which thing. And at the end of the day, it would take me hours. But the part of that was problematic, other than the time spent, was that it was really not that exciting and kind of made me not love my job as much because I was spending all of this time doing something that wasn't proactively helping the business. Now, today, I could use AI to help me summarize all of that, pull out important themes, and then I could spend all of that time helping the business move forward. So there's some really cool things that I think that we have to be excited about when it comes to AI, and beyond just like letting it help us do some skills. You're right. There are lots of core skills that we have to develop as humans in this profession. So of the 9, right, 2 of them are about doing the insights, but the other 7 are about understanding the business and really being that strategist. So if you're I'm anticipating, like, okay, but pick one, because we don't have a whole lot of time. No, but one that I think that we should really focus on, and I think is kind of underrated, is this idea of influencing businesses and partners to drive results. I think what can be taken over by AI is this idea of data collection and analysis. And if we treat insights like a handoff, that can be done, right? That can be done probably in the very near future. But we have to, understand what the data is about and not just give it to someone else to make sense of it. But really, the truth is, like, when we take the data that we've collected, work with our business partners, understand how to weave insights and strategy together in a partnership, that makes us both stronger, both teams, right? And so it goes beyond just delivering information. It's about partnership to really drive our business forward, leveraging all of these great tools that help us spend more time doing that and less time highlighting things.
I love that. So, challenging opinion.
Yes.
What if the business person or the product manager has 2 buttons? 1, collect, and 2, analyze. Do we then still need the insight function? Is that still necessary?
Yes, great question. And the answer is, if your insights function is only collecting and analyzing, I think you're pretty easily going to be taken over by a bot somewhere, right? But what is harder to be taken over by is this idea of having the right conversations and delivering the right results, creating trust so that when data is collected and analyzed and reported, that your partner knows absolutely that they should lean in and trust that data. And it's already, and put in a format and story told in a way that they go, okay, now I can take action on it. So it's really those value add skills. They're much more, I think, of the softer skills than the hard skills. That's what's going to push this function forward.
Right. Although there is nothing more rewarding than after that end of like your 1,000 handwritten, hand marked notes of finding that thing that actually reveals why the data is the
Yes.
way it is, and then saying like, "Oh, we got it." And you go to your business and say, "Look, this is actually what is the insight, and it should be action." There's still something rewarding in that, but it's going to be taken away from us because AI will just spit it out in a few bullets instantly, and we might overlook it because it sounds so silly that it could do it so fast, which I have seen people gloss over, like, oh yeah, sure, okay, but is there more? Is there not more? But then actually the insight was already right in front of them.
Yeah.
So that's something to know and to be mindful of. Have you seen that happen in your life as well?
We live in a world of instant gratification, and AI is
Right.
helping with that, right? So it's like, wait, what do you mean you need a couple of days to go uncover an insight? Hold on, let me back up. In the past, my partners would come to me and say, Elizabeth, we have this question. And I'm like, oh, great, I understand. I'll be back in 8 to 12 weeks, okay? And if I came up to them and said that today, I would get laughed out of the room, right?
Right.
Because we have to move at the speed of business, and AI can help us do that. But what we can't lose is, to your point, like that human lens of, oh my gosh, I'm in the business of understanding humans, right? We say consumer insights, but if I can be provocative for a second, I think we should rename our function. We should be human insights because it's really about the person behind everything, right? It's not shopper data, it's human data. So how do we bring forward that human that really is that what and so what, so that we can get to that now what piece and uncover
Right.
that magical idea of like, there's something here, it is, it's discovered. And you might have to go on 30 in-home interviews to find that nugget. But it's there. And that's something that I think that a human will be able to see better than anybody else.
Right. And we're very irrational as well, right? So we're
That is true.
saying one thing, doing another, and then the next day doing complete opposite and saying the same thing. So there's also that piece. But
Yeah,
look,
you're right.
AI will get better at finding and sniffing that out. And it's remarkably good already to just process those 13 interviews and tell you exactly like, hey, this person is probably holding back and she's not saying what she's
Yes.
saying. So those things are surprisingly good already from using these capabilities. So the judge is out on it, but yes, I love your point of view. Like we should be renaming the function. It's about that human intelligence, that human connection, the human insight, if you will.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about the 9 critical skills, because
Yeah.
like you said, there's only 2 about insights. There's 7 about the business.
Yes.
Yes. So that's surprising. I mean, that was surprising to me when I first encountered it, in a good way, because I
Okay.
think you're right.
Good.
Did you on purpose come to like seven business skills and 2 insight skills, or after writing you looked back and said, I actually wrote a book about influence and storytelling and business strategy? How did that come about?
Yeah, you're right. This wasn't an intention to like, I'm going to stop talking about these things and start talking. It was more of like, okay, I actually started developing these skills over 10 years ago. So I was at an organization, like a big company, and we had so many awesome, wonderful trainings for folks about how to run a meeting, how to do project management, but there wasn't any skills out there about how to be an insights professional and like what does it take to be successful in that role. So actually I started developing these skills as a way to help my team, right? To say, all right, at the end of the year, when we do our reviews, let's look at these skills. Let's look at these things because these are the things that are going to push you forward in your career. So they have to be added on, of course, to, the kind of corporate other skills too. But then if we look at them, we can say, hey, which of these things are you really good at that you need to leverage even more? or where are there some opportunities to develop? Because these are the things, if this is your function, that's really going to push you forward. And it helps, I think, also to write individual development plans and to say, okay, in this next year, you're like, okay, what skills am I going to work on? Well, I think it's more important to work on things like, influence and business context than it is to like any one specific data collection tool skill. That's
Right.
what's going to help you push forward. That's what's going to have an impact on the business. So anyway, that was a long story about it started out of a need for my team and evolved from there. And then I just, I wrote them all down. I looked at it and I said, oh dear, there's only two that are really about, specifically like doing and collecting insights. The other seven are about the strategist that goes along with all that information.
Yeah. So over the last decade, from those seven that are focused on business,
Yeah.
which one is the most underrated still? And maybe that has shifted over time. I don't know. Which one would you say is the most overrated?
Yeah, I think if in terms of underrated, definitely influencing the business and partners.
Right.
So that role of influence, that's one that we really have to have skills at and master, in order to have an impact on our business. I like to say I'm not here to be interesting. I'm not here to just tell you a nice story and then, wave and walk away. No, I'm here to be a springboard into action. And so that skill of influence is one that is incredibly important if I'm going to move from being interesting all the way into being impactful. That's the one. It's about really working together with my partners to understand, what's happening in their worlds and how they're making choices so that I can then go ahead and influence them.
So from influence to impact, I like that spectrum.
Yeah.
So how does one do that? Because sometimes you have a big insight, and then we have that insight. Everyone believes it's important, but we don't have capacity. We don't have room, and something else is more important. Like we need to
Yeah.
do this big data migration. So, sorry, we can't do anything for the customer in the next 6 months. So you don't get any impact. So, what's the trick to actually start having an impact as soon as you can and then start building from there? How do you
Yeah.
coach or mentor people who believe that they can do it, they want to do it, but how do you get there from like being interesting to
Yeah.
actually make impact and being closer on the spectrum to the right?
Yeah. The first and absolute primary thing that you have to do is ask your business partner, what action are you trying to take? Because what that does is it ensures that all of the work that you do to go collect or analyze data is done in a way that can be used. You don't want to spend your time, creating a report that's going to sit on someone's shelf. Like, I don't have time for that. And I don't have energy for that either, right? It's more important. It's important for the business that we drive impact. Otherwise, you're just some, thing that could be taken off of, the SG&A line on the on the profit and margin piece, of the finance is going to go, oh, that's SG&A. Well, let's take that out. No, actually, this is an important part of the business, and it's because we understand what consumers are doing, and if we can tie it to a business action, that's when you become impactful, right? And actually, when I started this whole journey, I gave a presentation that I thought was just awesome. And I'm like, I'm in the, yeah, this is great. This is great. And coming out of the presentation, one of my partners stopped me and said, Elizabeth, that was so interesting. And I was like, no.
You failed.
I failed. And it was a pivot moment for me in how I have to show up because being interesting is super fun. But what's even more fun though? Is driving impact for the business. That's even more fun. So, yeah.
No, I'm with you. But don't you think there's also some selection bias in there then? Because your business wants to take action on something. Then to make impacts, you're gonna do collection, whether you do research or
Yes.
survey, whatever. You're
Yeah.
gonna have some insight. And if it maps onto the thing you want to action on, great, you're there. And then you say, okay, fine, I got it. I can make impact now. I'm going back to the business. Here it is. So you're not digging deeper. You're not going broader because you got it. You have an insight that changes the decision or helps them to make the decision, and
Yeah.
you move on. What is the risk in that, and how do we avoid doing that too much, too often, and all the time?
Yes. So I think first thing is we ask what the action we're trying to take is. What's that thing that we're trying to do? And the second question that closely follows that is, what information do you need in order to make that choice? Or what's holding you back from making that choice? It really kind of points us in that direction. And so if you're just kind of going out and you find yourself over and over again kind of saying, yep, you're right, you should go ahead and do that, you might be asking the wrong question. You're digging in the right space, but you're asking the wrong question. And let me give you an example. So in my days at General Mills, I was working in the Progresso business. It's a soup business, canned soup. So ready to serve canned soup. And the team had come up with this incredibly delicious frozen soup. Okay. And so the food scientists came up, I mean, it was incredible. It tested so well. It was like frozen broth chips and vegetables that you put it in the pot and it melted down and it simmered into this like delicious homemade soup. And the consumer taste tests were like, yep, this is great, amazing. And so the team said, all right, let's put it together. Like, let's go put it out there and test it because like, this is amazing. And so the business was like, yes, shouldn't we launch this frozen soup product, right? And so you could at risk of being like, yep, you should do exactly what you think because, hey, it's incremental to the business that you have. It's a totally new shelf space, right? And so you can really drive your business in a new place and expand your brand is the second big thing too. So shouldn't we just do this? We know it tastes great. Well, my team worked with our R&D team. We packaged it up into these two kind of like little big containers and put it in Sam's Club, which is the club store here. And so it's a heck of a really big size container, put it on the shelf. And we're just waiting for it to go flying off the shelf, right? As people come back with their carts. And what happened was they would open the door, look at it, and close the door. What? And then people would come by, ooh, open the door. They'd even pick it up and then they put it back, close the door. I'm like, what are they doing? We got to tell them this thing is delicious. Like, it is amazing. It's like, it is so good. People said they love it. Why are they putting it back? Right. And so we started asking, like, what's going on? And it turns out when we were asking a different question, we're like, why don't you like this? What the answer was, hey, you made chicken noodle. And well, I love chicken noodle, but chicken noodle in a can is like good enough. Or I can make it at home well enough. Like if I'm going to go to the buying something this big that takes up this much freezer space, it's got to be something that I can't make at home or get out of a can. And so what we found was like, hey, even though the product was good, it was the wrong size because it was too big. It was in the wrong channel. It shouldn't be in club. And it was the wrong flavor. And so in this case, the action for the business was to not launch the product. And it was right for the business because it saved a heck of a lot of money in the end. So inaction was actually okay. And that's a case where we were digging in the right area because it was about product launch. But when we got to asking the right questions, that helped us make the right choice for the business. Sorry, that was a long example.
Fascinating example. No, but this is actually really good. And that's actually how you prevent millions of dollars of spend into the wrong thing and not flying off at all. So this is an important one. But coming back to like the original question, like what are you going to action on and how should that look like?
Yeah.
It sounded like you have almost like a briefing document, a set of questions, a set of things that you need from the business before you can even start to get to work. Is that right? Or is it always depending on different business, different context, that the way you get that data from a business leader?
Yeah, I do believe that there is a briefing document that you can and should, especially if you're early in your career or your function is in its kind of infancy stages, to help you push yourself and your partners to work together so you can be influential. And you have to understand what's the business objective, right? And then what's the key consumer question? And so, and then what's all of the details behind it? So I think about it like this. What action are you trying to take? We've talked about that one, right? But also, what's that key thing that's outlined to the business objective? What's the key thing that you have to know in order to take that action or make that decision? That's the key consumer question. The third thing that you have to ask your business partners is, what does success look like? And in the sense of, what does your insights project success look like? Is there, for example, a date by which we need to have the information all put together? So like if you're saying, hey, Elizabeth, we need to have, we got to make a decision on June 1st. I'm going to have to go, okay, I need to be fully done and back to Johan so he can make a choice by June 1st, right? So it could be a date. It could be, and if it's faster than that, like what do you need to hear from me? Is it a full, beautiful report in which I stand on a stage and talk about it? Or is it an email? Like, yep, good, go or no go, thumbs up, thumbs down. Like, how are you thinking about it? So I think you should talk through all of those things at the very beginning so that you don't get to the end. And I've had a partner also say, I'm sharing these things out of learned experience. I got all the way to the end of a project one time, and someone said to me, Elizabeth, that would be, that's cool, but it would have been really helpful to know this. I was like, right? I totally didn't ask the important questions up front. Like, what do you need to know in order to make a decision? And so that I went through all of this process. I used resources that were time, people, dollars, and I got to the end and I wasn't impactful because I hadn't asked that question up front. So I always challenge myself and my teams now, say, start up front. What action are you trying to take? What's the key thing that you have to know in order to take the action? And what does success look like?
I love that. In many companies, the question is not asked and is assumed, right? It's assumed that we know because we know what the problem is. The business is pretty clear. Okay, that conversion rate is out of whack. We're spending too much here. We're having many of this or that. So that's easy. Okay, great. So we want to fix that. So let us get you the data to help you fix that. But actually, sometimes people don't necessarily want to fix the big thing. They need something else. So asking this question, such an undervalued step in the simple process that it could be.
Well, and undervalued, and I think, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but like it's not the fun part.
No,
that's not the fun part, but it gets you to the fun part. If you're like me and fun is impacting the business, you got to do some of that upfront work and not just run out and collect data. You got to know what to collect and why it's important so that you can have fun in the end and have impact.
How do you bring back the impact to your teams? Because that's also where folks struggle a little bit to really understand, like, okay, we moved the needle, but what did I really do about it? What was my role in that? And sometimes we should be pretty proud of the conversion rate going back up, right? Or we saved the company millions of dollars in wasted resources on a bunch of frozen soup. So how do we bring that impact to life and to be proud of that so we can actually measure the way we impacted the business? How should we do that?
I would say this is important for two reasons. One is for the team and one is for your partners. But we absolutely have to think about every project we do. What did we do specifically that, and how do we understand, like, the business made a decision or didn't make a decision? It could be to not do something as well. And tying that back, we have to celebrate those moments, celebrate them every time, right? And sometimes it's easy to say, $5 million, right? You impacted $5 million of business. And sometimes it's like you saved the business an unknowing amount of trouble. But either way, we need to celebrate with the team. It's imperative for helping kind of keeping us going every day as insights leaders and insights teams in particular, because if we're tied to the business, we'll be more impactful. It's sort of like a flywheel. Right? In the sense of celebrate the wins and you get more wins. Like there it goes. It's also important for your partners to hear about how they're using insights to impact their business, or having advocates among your partners to say, hey, we called the insights team and they helped us do this, and now we've been really successful. If you can get your partners to be advocates for you, that'll make more people in the organization kind of pick up the phone and say, help us out.
Right. And also the other thing that you're saying, if I hear you correctly, say, sure, let's celebrate the wins. If there's a decision, if there's an outcome, an impact, measure it, celebrate it.
Yeah,
But no decision is also a decision, and we should just as much
absolutely.
celebrate that.
Yes. On the soup example, it was started out as like it started out as a case study of a failure. Because I'm like, I got it all wrong. But as the more and more I talked about it as a failure, I'm like, wait a minute, this is actually a success, right?
Right.
It wasn't that we didn't launch the product that was a failure. It was that we didn't launch the product, and that was a success for the business. So
Yes.
yes, absolutely celebrate. Celebrate
That's
or
where
learn.
the bias comes in, right? It's like
Yeah,
we believe the soup is great. We've seen the tests. We know it's great,
yeah,
and therefore it has to be great. So we're looking for data to back that up, right?
yeah,
So, and then you are having data that says, it's not a good idea, and therefore it feels like a failure,
yeah,
which is really weird, right? Because we assume it should be great.
yeah,
Therefore, everything that is counterfactual to that
yeah.
makes it not so great. But actually, you're right. It was great.
It was
Well,
great.
not the
And
soup.
I think because as an insights team, we'd really built partnerships with the business and we had built that layer of trust, they were open to hearing that, wait a minute, your data doesn't match our data. And I kind of have that
Oh,
conversation
how
where
worse would it be if you would be like not trusted? You would come with the data, say, "Thank you, Elizabeth. We're gonna ignore you. We're gonna launch anyway." Then it would have the big loss, and then what? Then you have to say like, "Told you," and then those are the
oh my
worst,
gosh, right?
right?
That's where it's like the I told you so
Mm.
conversation is never fun. As much as you kind of sometimes want to be like, I told you so. Well,
There you go.
it's never fun because it's never fun for the business. It's never fun for the team. And so like avoiding the I told you so at all possible, in all cases possible is good. And you do that by building those partnerships.
All right.
Yeah.
How do you use journeys in your work? And the reason I'm particularly interested in this is that what we are seeing companies do is using the notion of a customer journey to organize their data, but also their priorities, but also their
Yeah.
workflow around this, right? So almost having like a decision log in those journeys, like what did we ship, what did we launch, what did we not launch?
Yeah.
I don't know if they're
Yeah.
quantifying the epics they didn't ship, but anyway, that's a story for another time. But they're basically can like track back all the way to the start, like what are we doing and how are we impacting together the customer experience. So how are you using journeys in your insight work?
Yeah. I would start with your customer is having an experience, whether you have a customer experience plan or not. Right. And
Right.
so, um, if you can be purposeful about how you build your customer's experience and be thoughtful, you can create one that is really impactful and meaningful. And so I think as you think about journey, it's about understanding all the different points at which your customer is engaging with your brand or your product or your company, right? Whether it's products or services, it's all around front to beginning, and there really is no end to a customer journey anymore. And also, the journey has been kind of exploded in a way that you can go start a journey and then you can transfer to a new part of the journey. You can, go in store, go online, come back in store, use your phone and talk with an associate, call customer service, right? And so, yes, it's really, I think the most important way that we're using journey is to understand, are we giving our customers a way to kind of loop back and continue on the next part of their journey? It's an ever-going, evergreen, unending experience with our brand. Are we keeping them at some point, at all points, on that journey with us, in a sense that we're not letting them exit? We don't want them to um, exit. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, sure. So what you're actually saying is that because it's a never-ending relationship we're having with our customers, but they are choosing the channels to go in and out and tap in and out of our brand, and even they have like experiences outside of our control, right? They talk to their
Yeah,
friends or they're like super angry, but you don't know because you can't see it. But what actually you're saying is we should be more intentional about the end of one journey and the beginning of another. There's
yes,
insights. I don't know, I'm putting words in your mouth. I'm sorry for that. But there's insights that we should be uncovering for when are people moving into this new journey and exiting that one that
yeah.
can help us improve the business overall.
Yes, every touch point that a customer has with our brand, our product, or our service should lead to the next touch point, right? And I think oftentimes we say, here's the beginning of the journey and here's the end of the journey. And at the end of the journey is the checkout process. And we're
Right.
like, great, and then it's done. I'm like, no, actually, I would challenge us to say the checkout process should be the springboard to the next journey, right? That's that moment of truth in particular. Sorry, I have a really a lot of passion for for this part of a journey. Is that that's the moment of truth where a customer is handing over their money, and it could be either in like, I can't believe I'm handing over this much money for whatever I bought or whatever service I chose. Or it could be this excitement for like, yes, here's where I get to, use this product, engage in this service, and really kind of move forward and springboard into the next thing.
Right. And so what you're saying is like the transition between the checkout where we give the money and then the post-purchase experience is actually where in retail a lot of businesses are created or broken. Is that what you're saying?
I think that if we talk about journeys, we've said, oh, it's the end of the journey. Great, they gave us their money. But really, it should be sort of like, if you think about it like an infinity sign, kicking us back in, right? We shouldn't be thinking about it as the end of the journey. It should be the start of the next.
Right. I was a few episodes back talking to Gia Laudia. I don't know if you know her from Forget the Funnel. And we were joking about like our original journey in Data was a circular journey, literally
Yeah.
like the first application we did it. And then people went bananas. They said like, look, that's not how we do journey mapping. Like it should be like from left to right. And eventually we watched, but that original idea, like it's a never ending circle, it's a loop and they have like crossover points that
Yeah.
still sticks with me when I think about experience. And well, maybe we'll reintroduce it at some point in time.
I think that's a great idea. Yes, and I was like, we talk about the marketing funnel, right? It's like it starts at awareness and it comes down to conversion and purchase.
Exactly.
Wait, how do we get back to the top of the funnel? Like we have to have something that gets us back to the top again. So, whether it's a left to right journey or a funnel, I don't know. I think we've evolved into understanding like the funnel's been broken. The funnel's been shattered. The journey is not just linear. And that's a challenge that we all have to think about. How do we keep in a constant engagement with our customers?
I'm doing this fun thing called first, last, worst, best journey. So you wanna give me yours, the first journey in your life?
Oh, okay. I was thinking about this differently.
And,
Okay.
how did you think about it? You can take it in many ways. I'm
Right.
totally up for it.
I think okay. So I was anticipating a first journey. Here's how I think. Okay. First journey is your first experience with a brand, a product, or a service, right? In my mind. And I think it's your first chance to make a good impression. Sometimes, as humans, we're like, oh, I'm not good at first impressions. Brands have to be thinking about that too. Like, how do we make that first impression that someone says, okay, I want to have a second impression. I want to have a second thing. So first journey to me is first impression.
So if you think about it in this way, what's then the worst?
Oh, yeah. The worst is like the cringe moment. The worst journey is when you have we talked about, the end of the circle being, I've just given you my money. And the worst journey is when you're like, thanks, can you give me your phone number and your credit card and take this experience survey? And rather than this like magical moment of like springboarding me into using the product or the service that I just bought, it's like not just a parting goodbye. It's like, worst journey is like, thanks, now give us more information. So the worst happens at checkout.
Right. We're going to send you a short survey with 25 questions about your experience buying with us.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Exactly. That's the worst journey. And being as someone who's the collector of that data, I'm like, oh dear, I got to listen to my own advice here.
So talk to me about the best journey. I would love to get an example from you as well. I'm sure you've seen some great journeys in retail or in any other business. Like what is in your mind like the best journey?
The best journey is one, okay, you've had a good journey when even if you've spent money, even if you've spent time, whatever it is, you smile. Like you're excited to be part of it. You're excited to do it. One of the best journeys that I think are created is actually by Lego. And here's why, right? So I am not like a huge Lego builder. I'm not sure if I'm using the right terms, but my kids are, and they love it. What's so exciting is that they find anytime that we're in a store and there's Lego, like they have to engage again, right? So there's something about it. But I think what makes Lego give really awesome journeys is actually their in-store experiences. Because no matter what city I go to, there's a reason to visit the Lego store. So I was actually just in Barcelona not too long ago, and I went into the Lego store and they had a Lego building of the Sagrada Familia. And I was like, how cool is this? Like, if you're really into building and creating, this is something that is incredibly well done, but it's also unique to this space and this place, right? So there's a reason for you to visit a Lego store in every city that you go to, right? They're masters at a journey, masters.
Right. And the cool thing is that once you've been in one and you go to the next city, you'll be thinking about this, like, do they have a Lego store, right? Is that right?
Absolutely. And I mean,
Yes,
even
there
in
you
the
go.
terms of like, so there's a unique place that they're building, but also I think there's a unique personalization element where you're actually creating and customizing. In that same store, you could customize your own little personal figure. Like, I want to
Yes.
make an Elizabeth. Like,
Yeah,
how cool
exactly.
is that?
Exactly. My kids always want to do that, right? And do it again and again and again. And
Yes,
every store we go
yes,
to, like, it's the same. And there's always
yes.
a different story to the little
Totally. They
Lego
are
puppy.
masters of the best journey.
Well, that's fantastic. So, talking about the last journey, how do you think about the last journey? And you can't name insurance companies or end of life.
Oh, so what's the worst journey out there? Is
No,
that
no, no. Last, like when
last
you think
journey?
about the last year, like if it's never ending, right? If it's like this infinity symbol, like is there even one? Should we leave it open?
I think that the last journey is when you have an exit point on that continual one, right? What's taking you off that highway and making you exit and get like, I'm out of here and I'm never coming back, right? And customer experience has a big role to play in that. So your current customer is also the cheapest customer that you ever have to get back again, right? Because they're already partway through that marketing funnel. So don't let them exit. And whether it's because you weren't listening when they gave you feedback, they told you they were having a bad experience and you didn't listen, right? Or you kind of created a mess or a place that was difficult for them to navigate through. Anytime you give a customer an exit point is sort of their last point on the journey with you, and one that we want to avoid.
Right. I love that. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being with me today.
Absolutely.
If folks want to learn more about you, what is the easiest place to find your book, read
Yeah.
it, download it, get it, or get in touch with you? What can people do to get in
You
touch
can
with you?
find me on LinkedIn. You can follow me at love to connect, and also you can find the book on Amazon. So it's called More Than Just Interesting and How to Build an Insights Function for Impact.
All right. We're going to put people in the show notes and point them to it. Thank you again,
Awesome.
Elizabeth, for joining me
Thank
today.
you. This is really fun.
All right, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found it valuable today, don't forget to subscribe to the Experience Edge on your favorite podcast channel, leave a review, and share it with your team. I'd be delighted. Today's episode was brought to you by Daydo, the AI journey management solution for enterprise. To have an edge on your business strategy and to know why your customers do what they do, visit daydo.com and explore more resources to accelerate your customer experience game. And remember, the journey to creating customer-centric impact never ends, and here's always a new edge to discover in doing things differently. Next week, new episode. Until then, keep pushing the edge, stay inspired. See you in the next episode.